All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So first, I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. My name is Langston Clark. I'm the founder of Entrepreneurial Appetite, a series of events dedicated to building community, supporting Black businesses, and promoting intellectualism. And when we talk about Black businesses, I mean that in the broad sense, because what we try to do with our events is partner with local entrepreneurs or just organizations who use the entrepreneurial spirit to support and help sustain and maintain Black communities. And so for this night's event, we're going to be having a discussion with Dr. Leonard N. I'll introduce him in a few minutes, but first, I want to give our partners an opportunity to talk about what they do. And so Dr. Ryan Sutton is going to talk about the Heman Sweatt Center for Black males.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to have y'all on this call and being a part of this talk. I'm the director of the Heman Sweatt Center for Black Males, a holistic support program here on UT's campus. We pride ourselves in not only walking onto campus with Black males, walking onto the 40 acres with Black males, but actually walking through the 40 acres with them. From our Black male orientation, our weekly power hours, our mentorship program, Wall Street, collegiate Black male retreat. We like to get around our brothers and create a support system that makes sure that they're prospering and excelling in ways that we know they can. And at the end of the day, we want to let them know what Black male excellence looks like and empower them to redefine and define what their narrative is. So happy to be joining you all today and co-sponsoring this event and looking forward to the discussion. Feel free to snap that QR code right there to take you to the website, see how you can get involved and get some more information. Thank you.
Also want to give a shout out to a supportive group of Texas X's, the Black X's of Texas in San Antonio. They have been an integral part of supporting Entrepreneurial Appetite and the efforts of the Heman Sweatt Symposium. They've created a really nice family for me here in San Antonio as I made the transition from UT Austin to San Antonio. And so we do a number of events here in the community to help Black students from San Antonio transition to the 40 acres. And so just want to give them a shout out. And if you live in San Antonio or if you have children in San Antonio who are interested in attending UT Austin, please reach out to us on Facebook, or you can send me an email after this, and we would love to get you connected and talk more about how you can enjoy the experience at the University of Texas at Austin. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Leonard N. He is the leader of what I think is the largest diversity and inclusion organization in the country, the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement at the University of Texas at Austin. What I love about Dr. Moore personally is that he's invested in the lives of students, faculty and staff at the university. He teaches over 1,000 students every year. And so for those of you who aren't in higher ed, to be in the position that he's in, to have the commitment to still be in the classroom in that way, I think is unprecedented around the country. And on top of that, he is an alumnus of Jackson State University. And if any of you all saw Deion Sanders give his speech about how he got to Jackson State, you know, you might get the fire shot up in your bones or caught the Holy Ghost a little bit. But what I love about Dr. Moore is that every time he teaches class, the way Deion Sanders did that introduction speech, that's the type of classroom you're walking in. And so students get tons of encouragement, tons of guidance, and a tremendous amount of leadership from him. And so on top of that, he's a great family man. So right now he's at his son's football game. And so he is spending quality time with the family, but also taking his time out today to speak with us about his book, The Defeat of Black Power, Civil Rights, and the National Black Political Convention of 1972. And so I want to begin just by asking you, Dr. Moore, what was your motivation for writing this book, and how did the National Black Political Convention get lost in Black history? Because I never heard of it. So if you could just...
Yeah, I think for me, man, if you look at, you know, the long struggle for civil rights, most of us would say it started in 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education, or 1955 with the lynching of Emmett Till, but nobody ever talks about the ending point. And I would argue that, you know, the National Black Political Convention sort of is the end of an era. I think it's the zenith of the Black freedom struggle, because for 3 days, Black folk got together from all over the country, came to Gary, Indiana, in a small high school gym, And they realized that they needed to make the transition from protest to politics, right? So Bayard Rustin writes this article in 1966, from politics to protest. But it took like 6 years for them to realize, okay, we've done enough protesting, we've done enough marching. Now, at what point do we begin to make some, I would say significant change for the community? So it gets lost because most people, we don't even talk about the Black 70s period, and I would say the 3 biggest issues for the Black community in the 70s were, affirmative action, school busing, in this convention, but we don't even really talk about the 70s. So that's why I think it sort of gets lost.
Thank you. So as I was reading the book, like, we know what the ending is just from the title, but I'm reading it and I'm thinking they're going to do it. 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 And then it ends like Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
The people that you think are going to be the heroes aren't the heroes, and everything falls apart. And I'm going to read a passage here, and then we're going to kind of open it up for some dialogue with the audience.
Okay.
But what I want to do is this passage stuck out to me because it speaks to, I think, a lot of the feelings we have right now about, do we choose Democrats or Republicans? We're in a weird space because we haven't really seen, or people feel like they haven't seen the benefits from either party. And so this is a quote from Carl Stokes. "There's nothing inherently responsive about the label Democrat, nor the label Republican. Black people can ill afford belonging if the only thing they get out of belonging is to be able to say, I belong." As Stokes neared the end of his speech, he reiterated that electoral politics was not for the politically ambitious. Politics is tough. Good rhetoric, good looks don't mean you can get elected dog catcher. And don't round up a bunch of entertainers, football players, and performing artists, God love them, and permit them to make political decisions.
That's right.
They can help you raise funds by giving a concert, but unless you have folks registered to vote, unless you know how to get the vote out on election day and get the votes, get people to vote the right way, unless you know how to count the precincts and wards and counties and delegates and electoral votes, you may end up with pleasant memories of a campaign, but you won't end up in office. And in closing, Stokes laid out 5 points for the strategy for the 1972 election. Black elected officials and Black voters make no commitment of any announced or draftable candidates for president. So they weren't committing to anybody to be president. Black voters concern themselves with issues and not personalities. Black voters in their respective states start now in the process of deciding upon delegates to next year's political party conventions. They were planning ahead. That communication be developed with other political minority groups as issues are formed and common interests identified for coalition politics. They were interested in interest convergence with other minorities and oppressed people. And the last one is that Black delegates go to the convention with full understanding of why they are there. So they needed to go to the convention with a purpose. This passage right here, to me, just kind of outlines all of the things that we're talking about right now. Like, we got athletes and entertainers sort of being the face of like what our politics is. We've got tension between, do we be Republicans or do we be Democrats? So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about like what happened in the past got us to here today, and what are some of the parallels?
First off, I think Stokes was being prophetic. He was the first Black mayor of a major city. And what he always said was that of any other political office, being mayor of a city gives you the immediate opportunity to improve people's lives. So, and he's also talking about building a Black political structure, voter registration, voter mobilization, and voter participation. You know what I mean? So he's been very prophetic. Now, when he talks about entertainers and stuff, don't get me wrong, our entertainers are gifted in their area of expertise. But when you got comedians and rappers, in many ways, being the voice of Black community, what's the brother's name out of Atlanta who everybody just gushes over? Vic something, what's his name? Is that Mike something like that?
Killer Mike.
Yeah, Killer Mike. Killer Mike speaks for a constituency, but I'm just amazed at the platform our entertainers get. And then you go people who've been in the struggle, registering voters, people who've been holding elective office, they can't get a one-on-one with Joe Biden for an hour. You know what I'm saying? But you'll give it to an entertainer who not even from the US and who not even African-American. And so now, as it relates to leveraging the Black vote, understand this. The Black vote typically is the swing vote. And I was teaching a class this summer for UT faculty and staff. We had about 2,000 people on every week, Dr. Clark. And I made the statement that Black folk don't have to vote. You can stay home if you don't like a candidate. And so they got upset because they understand that if the Democrats in office, their issues will get addressed, right? The feminists will get their issues addressed. The queer community will get their issues addressed, right? But black people, we rarely get our issues addressed. Even Barack Obama, and we all love him. We said, Doc, what about us? And he said, I gotta govern for everybody, for everybody. So there's a great book, man. It's called The Price of the Ticket. And it talks about how when Obama got elected, black activism basically was silenced because it was like, be quiet. You know, he's trying to do the best he can. He ain't got nobody to go to for advice. Don't mess it up for him. And we get lulled to sleep. And I remind everybody that the infrastructure for mass incarceration was laid with Bill and Hillary Clinton, all right? So I think black folk need to be strategic about their vote. Joe Biden right now knows he's gonna get 90-something% of the black vote. And so I think we just need to be a little bit more strategic and leverage it and not just give it away.
So, but I'm almost wondering, like, if I think within our community, if you say things like that, like, you know, you run the risk of being like excommunicated. You know, if you say you're not gonna vote, people look at you like Joe Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. And there were some people who didn't like that, but the other folks were like, yeah, that's fine.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, like, we talk about issues in the black community. We talk about finances, right? We got to control our money, all of those different things. We need financial literacy. We need literacy in a traditional sense of being able to read books. But I'm almost wondering, like, how do we up the game in terms of like our political literacy? I don't know, and I'm just being honest, and this is terrible. I'm a college professor. I don't know who my local representative is in terms of like at the city level.
Now that may be on you, Langston.
That is on me. That is on me. And there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for that. But we always know every 4 years who's running for president. Like, we don't know our senators, the complexities of state government. So I'm wondering, like, whose responsibility? Is there an institutional responsibility?
No, it's ours. Langston, you live, what county do you live in?
Bexar County.
You can go to Bexar County right now, and there's a sample ballot. And you can see who's running, what issues are on there, but we can't blame people for us not taking the time to go do it and research it. You know what I mean?
I guess what I'm saying is like, how do you make it so it's almost like going to school? Like when I was in 4th grade in New Jersey, like we learned New Jersey state government in history, but I don't live in New Jersey anymore. And I never even considered like what the county government does. Like we got a judge, like what's the judge of the county do? And I had no understanding of any of those things.
I mean, I tell people this, although a president can use the bully pulpit and set the social and political climate for a country, I believe it's people at the local level who have a much bigger impact on your life, you know, than Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But let me suggest this, just because black people have the right to vote, they don't have to exercise it. And I just don't think we've been strategic enough. I've never understood why we don't go to the Republicans and say, okay, this the percentage of vote we got. What are you offering? You see what I'm saying? And so the Democrats never have to work for our vote. They've never had to work for it. And in many ways, we've just sort of given it to them.
Yeah. So we want to open this up to the audience. So if you have questions, you could type it in the Q&A. And then we're going to have DJ Christopher Kelvin kind of direct us to your questions. And so just go ahead,
yeah, you can put it in the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. And I'm gonna go with Dr. Nelson. Her hand has been raised for a while now, so I'm gonna allow her to talk. Dr. Nelson.
So thank you guys so much for allowing me to join. I just want to say where I needed this book. I just wrote about the Congressional Black Caucus, and the book is under review. And I needed your book then. It's too late. I needed this book.
Thanks, Doc.
And I say that because this is like you said, and this is the question that I have for you. Like you said, this history gets lost, and what comes out of it, although we may have not gotten the heroes that we thought that we should have gotten, what we do get is a Black Declaration of Independence out of this meeting, right? And so my question to you is, where did you do the research to find this? Because I went to Howard University and did an archival dig, and there was very little remnants of it. Like it was inside of the congressional papers and the founding papers. I knew it happened. I knew some of the players, but where did you really go to research and get the foundation?
Okay, you got to go to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, Harlem, New York. Everything is at the Schomburg Center. You get everything you want there. there are boxes and boxes of materials, and that's where the richest materials were at the Schomburg Center. Go look up the Robert S. Brown research papers at the Schomburg Center, and you'll get you'll get everything you want right there.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
So speaking about the CDC, I think if people knew what happened towards the end of the book with the Congressional Black Caucus,
I can explain.
My question is, would people view these folks that we view as heroes now, would we still view them as heroes if we knew what happened?
But Langston, here's your dilemma. By 1971, King is dead. The Black community is splintered, because although everybody didn't agree with King's theory of nonviolence, everybody respected him, right, as sort of the head of a movement. So what happens by 1970, 71, you have two camps of Black people. You got Black elected officials, educated Black folk in one camp, and the other camp, you got Black nationalists. So the Congressional Black Caucus represents one segment. People like Amiri Baraka and others represent another segment. Now, here is the issue. Black nationalists would always criticize these Black Congress people. But I remember these Black Congress people would say, Amiri Baraka, who the hell are you? Who do you represent? And they would say, how the hell can you call me an Uncle Tom when I was elected in an all-Black district and got 90% of the vote? So the division came with Black nationalists had nothing tangible to offer. They could offer symbolism, they could offer slogans, but at the end of the day, Black elected officials, they could offer jobs, they could offer so much more. And so in many ways, it was a debate over which way is the Black community sort of gonna go. So I don't look at the Congressional Black Caucus as sellouts. I mean, I think they understand, they were not going to join the Republican Party. They did not have an infrastructure nor the population to support an effective third-party effort. You see what I'm saying? So they said, we're going to stay in the Democratic Party, but try to form, in many ways, a collective political bloc in a sense within the Democratic Party.
So I want to give the audience a chance to speak, but I got to say this. At the end of the book, I think it's the last chapter, it's the representative from Indiana. I forget his name. Okay. And he said something that was poignant to me. He was like, if in South Africa, 2% of the population can control the other 98% or something like that, the minority in South Africa can control the population and resources and all of that, talking about colonizers, then why can't the, 10% of Black folk who lived where he represented, have substantial political power where he was? And I think this goes back to my question about, like, is what's missing in this conversation the development of Black political literacy?
Yeah, well, we need to develop a Black political culture. I don't know what it means anymore. Many of us saw what went on in Louisville the other day, and it was interesting because people were hating on the brother, the Attorney General, calling him a sellout, and they said Kamala Harris was doing the same stuff in California. You know what I'm saying? So they like, well, why is she getting the pass? And this brother, in many ways, is getting crucified. So, I think that the development of a Black political culture is so critical. And I think you said it best, Dr. Clark. We don't even know who's running for city, who our city council rep is, who our state rep is, who our state senator is. So we got a lot of work to do at the local level.
So, Doc, there's a question that came in from Clarence Williams, a graduating senior from Prairie View. You got that SWAC love. They want to know what are the books that they need that you would recommend for them to be politically literate?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I mean, that is a big question. It depends on what you want. I mean, the first thing I would do, like I said a minute ago, whatever county you're in, go print out the sample ballot and just sit there for an hour, go through every candidate and see what they're talking about. I mean, so I don't know about books to read per se. I'm a big fan. You can watch some documentaries and probably learn, and probably get a whole lot more out of documentaries. I mean, I don't know. We're in a very unique political moment. I will say that. And here's let me say this to the audience, Kelvin. If you look at the lowest point in Black life, the period between 1877 and 1900, lynching, sharecropping, convict leasing, all of that, right? That's the darkest day of the Black community, 1877 and 1910. Do you realize that was the period when we did all of our institution building? 90% of our HBCUs were founded during the Jim Crow period. 8 of the 9 Black Greek organizations founded during that period. All of your major African-American church denominations, with the exception of the AME Church, founded during the Jim Crow period. Every Black professional association, doctors, funeral home directors, educators, literally every Black professional organization founded during the Jim Crow period, the National Urban League, the NAACP. So understand this. When we realize that we don't have any help in DC or from the White House, and when we realize we got to rely upon ourselves, what we typically do, we do some amazing institution building.
The next question that was brought in was from anonymous attendee. They want to know why do so many African Americans become Democrats if the KKK spawned from the Democratic Party and Democrats were against the emancipation of slaves?
All right, so you're talking about, so basically what happened, the Democratic Party will be the party of white Southerners for the most part, well up until, I would say, the Great Depression. What you see with the Great Depression, when FDR gets elected 32 or 36, don't quote me on that. But anyway, Black people shift from being Republican to Democrats because of the New Deal programs. You know, FDR had this belief that the government had a responsibility to lift everybody out of poverty. So that is where you see the shift. The South will still stay Democratic. They'll become Dixiecrats in the 1940s and 50s. And then when LBJ passed the civil rights legislation, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, what he said when he signed both pieces of legislation, he said, the white Southerners will no longer be them. He said, we have just lost generations of white Southerners to the Republican Party. And that is what happened. White Southerners, beginning in 68 with Nixon's election and 72 with Nixon's reelection, they begin to vote Republican. So things in many ways get sort of flipped over the course of the 20th century.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to Maurice Gibson for our next question. Brother Maurice Gibson.
More.
Doc, what's up, Doc?
You know that I was not going to miss this opportunity.
Come on, Doc. Columbia, what's going on, man?
Not too much. First of all, you know, I've been, you know, just lauding and praising your book ever since you wrote it, particularly because of my interest in this same subject matter. And one thing I want to comment on and then just get your thoughts on, you know, while you spend the majority of the time, rightfully so, on the first one, you know, you briefly mentioned the second one, right? And I think it's important to contextualize this moment. You had this huge 8,000 person event in Gary, Indiana, and then just a year later, 600 people showed up in Little Rock. So, so when you say defeat, it absolutely was the defeat of Black Power. But, you know, my question for consideration is, you know, what does this say about the failure of coalition building, right? You know, we see this in the early 60s with SNCC moving into this Black Power phase. Now we're talking about the 70s, the exact same type of breakdown, just in reverse. So what does this say about coalition building amongst Black people?
Maurice, let me say this, Doc, and thank you for calling, man. The Black community is not politically monolithic. And I'll just share a personal story. We were at Thanksgiving 2018, and my sister revealed that she voted for Trump. And Maurice, the whole house went silent. You know what I'm saying? And her son, my nephew, he runs in these white evangelical circles. He's a gospel singer, but grew up Black, went to Morehouse. So he said he was at a prayer dinner the day after the Trump election. Listen to this, y'all. And he said he was meeting with these two dynamic prayer warriors, these two older white sisters. And they told him that when Fox News showed that, you know, Trump had showed the red, all the states that Trump had won on the map. And they said when they saw all that red, they said that was the blood of Jesus covering America. and the big question was, I said, well, what did you say? He said, well, I sort of agreed with them. I'm like, no, that's crazy. So here's the issue, Maurice. The Black community is politically divided. We don't want to admit it. We don't want to talk about class at all. That's why police brutality is the issue that gets us all riled up, because that's the one issue that affects rich, poor, light skin, dark skin, boule, links, Jack and Jill, alphas, you know, everybody. And so the problem is we don't, and I'll say this, I've been very strategic about not giving a lot of interviews since the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. You know why? Because the Black elite typically hijacks the conversation. And when Black folk take to the street, it's the Black elite. We get book deals, we get consulting contracts, we get speaking gigs, we get all that stuff. But understand that no matter how woke I can't claim to be, Maurice, I've never been poor before. And so I think at some point, the Black middle class has to begin to articulate the issues of the Black poor. and really become invested in that. We can't be spending time over getting Negroes into UCLA and Harvard and Michigan. That to me is a waste of time, all right? So we got to begin to, I would say, switch our focus a little bit, you know what I'm saying, and find out what is it the Black poor needs. Sorry, y'all. Sorry if I'm rambling. My apologies.
Now you're good, Doc. I think that a lot of people, some of the questions that are coming in, talked about that collective politics, right? And I know we talk about the African Americans, and me being from the Caribbean, what does that look like, you know, in this new age of Black? We talk about Nigerians being in the country. We talk about, you know, Caribbean people being here. You have Cubans who identify as Black. You have other Dominicans and Panamanians and all these other cultures. What does that new age of Black collective look like today?
Very, very diverse. But here's it. But we don't have a shared experience of suffering. And our Caribbean brothers and sisters, you know, they weren't forced to come. Many came for better opportunities. So while they are Black, they still have, in many ways, an immigrant frame of mind. And there's nothing wrong with that. That the U.S. is sort of a place of opportunity. And we have to quit making it seem as if we all have a shared experience. Now, if you follow, I don't know how many of y'all follow like Tariq Nasheed and Boyce Watkins, but you know there's a big divide now. They got something called the American Descendants of Slaves, Foundational Black Americans. And basically what they're talking about in this whole reparations debate, they say that should be strictly for the American descendants of slaves. Now, let me say something about immigrants. One of the things that disturbed me when I was at Ohio State, I was a graduate student. I was talking to a brother from Ghana, and he called us cotton pickers. He said that's what we were. He said we were lazy. He said we got all this opportunity in the U.S., but we're lazy. We don't value education. And so it was just interesting at his approach. But he had no idea that if it wasn't for the civil rights legislation passed in the late 60s, he wouldn't even be allowed to come in the country. So too often, many of our immigrant groups, these are the ones from the diaspora and also from Europe and Asia, have no idea that in many ways, the struggles of Black folk opened up the floodgates for them to come during this wave of immigration.
So I think with that, is there any hope to have another National Black Political Convention? Is it even worth attempting to do?
I mean, what's the issue? What issue is going to bring us together? Yeah. Is it going to be what, lack of health care? Well, most of us on this call got health care. Is it going to be messed up public schools? Most of us on this call, we got school choice. If we live in a district that we don't like, we got the money to go put them somewhere else. So I've been asking, what is the issue? And I would say the Black elite too often dominates the conversation. We dominate the conversation way too much. All right.
So someone asked, I think it's Talbert Hill, they said, you say leverage the political power. What are some specific things that people should do to leverage the political power? And I know you talked about the ballot. I just want to make note. I put the ballot sample. So if you live in Texas, you can go to Ballotopia. It's a link in there. You can find your sample ballot for November elections. Early voting starts on October 13th. You know, go to the polls. But Doc, specifically for you, what are some ways that you can leverage your political power?
Let me say this, and we don't even have to, we can start with the homeowners association. We can start with PTA. I'm amazed. Man, my son dropped the interception. Pick that off, man. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So you can start with school board, PTA, homeowner association, and you would be amazed just how much stuff people do in public. You know what I'm saying? But we have got to take time to go to the meeting. You got to go on Monday night. You got to go on Wednesday night. You got to go on Thursday night. And I think we also, you know, I mean, I would say just start small, but we have got to begin to make the effort to go and get active and participate.
Awesome. We're going to call on Cameron McCoy now. Cameron?
Hey, Doc. How you doing, Doc?
I'm good, brother.
All right. So one of the things that you bring up, you talk about the rights of people. You talk about how, you know, Blacks have not been politically active, politically mobilized, but how much of that weighs on, and through your research, you know, I'd like to know what trends you saw throughout your research, what trends you can connect to today through Black political activism, and can you talk to me about fears of white people and how that hampers Black political activism, or maybe it might be part of the system and integrated into it. because we see that through the school system.
Cam,
Trying to get my
man,
video here.
That's a deep question, Cam. I would say in terms of trends, man, I don't know. It's just that the political situation, the Black community, you know, is so fluid. You know what I mean? And again, like I said, I don't think we want to acknowledge just how much divided by class we are. When Donald Trump made that statement about a month ago, he was talking about you don't have to worry about poor people moving to your neighborhood, bringing your property values down, bad values. That wasn't, to me, that wasn't a race discussion. That was a class discussion, right? Because you can go to some middle-class Black folk in Houston and Dallas and Atlanta and Cleveland and Detroit, and they will tell you, we do not want to live around the Black poor, all right? So what I've just been trying to get people to focus on, Cameron, is to acknowledge that we have class. Look, dude, our churches are divided by class. So much of the Black community is divided by class, but we don't want to acknowledge it, but I think we need to.
All right, next up, we're gonna go to Christopher Bell.
Hi, hello, greetings.
Hi, Chris, you got a question?
Comment. I thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I do see the value in acknowledging that social class does have a big influence on what we perceive as the Black experience. Everyone has an individualized experience, but I think my frustration is that I honestly believe a type of bullying, if you will, that these officers are constantly killing Black and brown bodies in every single state they do so. And each time, what is the psychological effect?
Yeah, Commissioner Bell, can you speak? Go ahead.
I think his question is what are the psychological effects of the killings that are happening in the Black community? Is that correct, Chris?
I mean, it's nothing new. I mean, y'all can go Google Malcolm X's speech in 1962 in Los Angeles after the LAPD killed Ron Stokes, and after the Mayor Sam Yorty and the DA, these people went up into the mosque and killed these Muslim brothers. And so the point is, it is nothing new under the sun. That was what, 58 years ago. So we understand the deep psychological effects, but my issue is that we have been through worse. We have been through a lot worse. And we know how to deal with racism. We have dealt with it before, but we can't get so psychologically, I would say, defeated where we don't want to try. And we know this stuff has been going on, but we have always been able to persevere through it.
So awesome. I'm thinking about, like, you know, we just had the basically the disappointing announcement about the indictment of the officers with the whole Breonna Taylor situation. And I think a lot of the points that you're making, kind of, even with this, like, we see these things on TV in ways we haven't seen before. I think you would concede that. The assumption is that situations like that would bring all of us together. But even with, you know, what's perceived as riots or protests, to your point, like, I don't think Black people who are middle class and well-to-do, I don't think they're getting down with that. Like, those are debates that we have, you know, within our communities and things like what's the response to the police violence, both sort of like in the moments after it's happening, but preventative in terms of the politics. So I think there's got to be a space where we can at least say around this idea of police brutality that there's got to be some political overlap among the different factions of Black politics, that we can at least try to address that issue.
I mean, Langston, you know, I believe you would think so. And let me tell you what was profound about what these college athletes did this summer, all right? I mean, these are primarily middle-class Black kids, right? At these universities, you know, and what is more threatening to the system in some of these southern states, Texas, Alabama, places like that, than these athletes who generate hundreds of millions of dollars for that enterprise, standing up and saying, you know what, we're not going to participate, you know. And so for me, man, we love to put stuff on we love to put pressure on athletes, entertainers. What you going to do, my question is, you know, what are we as adults going to do? And I don't think it's everybody's right to protest or be in the street, but I think we all got to find our individual lane, because here's the deal. Whenever Black folk protest, it's the middle class that benefits. We get all the benefits of it. We just sit at home and we intellectualize and we get jobs. These companies creating diversity positions, and we eat off Black misery. That's the real. And we got to begin to acknowledge that.
We got time for a couple more questions. The one that came in is kind of in the higher education space, so I really want to get this one to you. What does higher education institutions need to do to reconcile the past and current racist practices? We saw it happen with the athletes taking a stance, right? But as institutions, what do they need to do?
Let me say this, and let me say this as someone who spent 24 years at predominantly white institutions, 9 at LSU, and this is my 14th year at the 23 years. This is my 14th year at the University of Texas. And I've talked to some Black students about this. I'm like, okay, now we're gonna fight to get a statue up, or we're gonna fight to change the name of that building. But the name of that building is not having any effect on your ability to come to that school and kill it academically. And I remember somebody told me when I was in grad school, Leonard, the most radical thing you could do is graduate. And I thought that was a conservative statement. I thought this guy was kind of selling out, kind of being soft, but now I get it. And so, but what kills me, Cuddy, is when people say they feel traumatized, and here's what I need your help with, Cuddy, and I'm 49, is when people tell me they feel traumatized because the building is named after a slave owner. My professorship is named after George Littlefield, all right? Just go Google him, okay? And when they were deciding what kind of fellowship to give me, Dr. Ted Gordon said, no, give Leonard the George Littlefield professorship. So I think while symbols, building names, I think that's very important. I think that's only one part of the struggle. And I would say number 2, what I'm liking now is there's a resurgence in HBCUs. You know, there's a resurgence, people going to HBCUs. You see a lot of these high profile athletes. Howard University just signed these 2 twins. I think they 6'2" from the Dallas area, you know, to go play volleyball at Howard. And so I think what you're beginning to see is a resurgence in the HBCU. So what I would say, I think it's time we begin to reinvest in many ways in our institutions.
Well, Doc, since you brought it up, you know, I got to ask you, this is a personal question coming from me.
Please.
We're both from the SWAC, right? Can you help me understand, why does the SWAC and other HBCU conferences keep playing by the NCAA rules when they can go help all these families create wealth for their schools and really change the way that some of these athletes are living and giving them their actual right?
Okay. Let me sneeze first. Excuse me. All right, here we go. Here's the issue, Cuddy. If Prairie View, Texas A&M say they're leaving the NCAA, they're going to go join the NAIA, and they're going to start paying players, all right? When players in Texas begin to ignore UT and A&M and Texas Tech, understand the state legislature will shut that down within 5 minutes. The only way that model can work, Cuddy, is that your small HBCUs, Wilberforce, Houston Tillotson, man, what school is Mike Sorrell president at up in Dallas? That's the only way it'll work, all right? Because you don't understand, you know, they're not going to allow Jackson State, Alcorn, and Valley to have a competitive recruiting advantage over Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and USM. And that's the one part, while I agree with you in theory, I think that's the one part people don't realize, that the state legislatures control these institutions ultimately.
Awesome. Langston, it looks like we are coming to the end with all our questions. If you have another one for Doc, we still have time for some more.
So I kind of want to just have you talk about like how you feel about the different personalities, and not just the rappers, right? We got Killer Mike, but like Candace Owens, like because I don't want to get in trouble. This is being recorded.
No. I mean, let me say this, Langston.
Let me finish the question. Let me finish the question.
Go ahead.
Because it's about 80% of the things like people like Candace Owens say, maybe about 85%. I kind of agree with what she says. And then it's like her and Marcus Lamont Hill had a conversation, and it's about Marcus Lamont Hill is about 80-85% of the things that he said I agree with.
Right.
But we get caught up, just miss the little pieces, and we can't come together politically.
Right.
It's this little stuff.
And Candace Owens is nothing new. You know, we have an honor uncle, like we got people in our family that think like that. I think that the piece is that what Candace Owens is doing, she is breaking the #1 unwritten rule. Don't get in front of white folks and tell our business, right? And it's funny that most people don't realize, I tell folks that we can walk and chew gum at the same time, meaning people get upset, well, y'all protesting police brutality. What about your families? What about black on black violence? And I say, we do both. We do it all the time. I tell my students at UT, yeah, I'm a fight for you on campus. You know, I'm a fight for you, but understand you got to handle your business in the classroom. So I think that the message from black to black community, it has always been very, very nuanced. And we shouldn't allow ourselves just to get upset because Candace Owens is only saying stuff publicly that we say around the kitchen table and the dining room table all the time. And if you don't believe me, get with some middle-class black folk, go to a nice restaurant, have some original black folk in the restaurant, come in there talking loud, and what's the first thing we say? You can't go nowhere without blank, 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 messing stuff up. So we just as guilty of it. We just keep it private and we don't go public with it.
All right, so
we got one more question, Langston. One more.
Go ahead.
All right, Dr. Nelson.
Yes. So this is the question that I have, Doc. You said, you know, middle class black folks. So this is something that I struggle with very, very often, right? So I may have not been poor, but my father is a blue collar worker. My mother worked for the state of California. For all intents and purposes, I'm, you know, if I'm not the black poor, I'm very close to it, right? And so now I'm a professor.
Okay.
Right, right. So now I'm a professor, right? And for me, the community sees me in the position that I'm in, and not really understanding that I understand the struggles where they are, because in many ways, as you know, I got ran out of white institutions because of the things that I said and the things that I championed in the name of them, right? And so my question to you is that how do us, and I don't want to say all of us are in this position, but there's more and more of us who are becoming first generation PhDs, first generation inside of this higher class black. How do we then connect back to that community so that they don't see the level of separation, because it doesn't really exist? So how do we break that barrier down? Because I think that, like you said, this classism thing is huge. And so how do we break that down, especially now for me who, you know, when the loud folks come into the restaurant, I don't feel bad, right? Like, I'm like, why are y'all tripping? Why are y'all mad at them? They just, right? So there's that thing that's still there for me that's lingered, which is why I'm in the SWAC right now, right? Which is why I'm at Southern teaching.
And you'll deal with a different set of issues there, all right? if you haven't already. I would say this: number one, you don't have to prove yourself to anybody, right? And I think sometimes when black folk get a PhD or get a lot of formal education, we have this internal battle going on. You know, like, I gotta show that I'm super down. Be your authentic self. I'm a suburban guy. Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Cleveland Heights, Ohio was probably like a working class suburb. We had people at my high school who went to Princeton, and some brothers were going to Princeton. Everything under the same roof. But you got to be your authentic self. And so you don't got to go to trying to be super down. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm at the University of Texas. I'll be like, hey, I have access to resources. How can I help you move the needle forward? You see what I'm saying? So, Doc, and don't worry about this shadow you got. You know, you got these mind games going with yourself. It's all about just being your authentic self. And I just tell you, just love folk. That's all you got to do. But the problem is, because I know a lot of black folk from the suburbs who want to front like they from the hood. And that's when you get called out and you really get your black card revoked.
So I want to piggyback off a question from Lizette Goodlow.
Yeah.
And so if how do we teach the content in this book to our children? Like, how do we raise the political voice, the political literacy, and tell the stories like the one you told right here? So let me give you a quick. You can go watch an Eyes on the Prize clip. It's volume 2 or series 2 Eyes on the Prize clip. It's, I think that the title of that clip is going to be called Our Time Has Come or something like that. And that video is 5 or 6 minutes long. I remember when my kids were young, we were sitting up watching Emmett Till videos on the reel, watching Emmett Till videos when my kids were like 5, 6, 7. So to utilize the resources you have at your disposal, because you may not have the time to sit down and read a 200-page book.
Doc, there's one more question that came up. Do we need more black leaders like Jackson, King, X in order to make change or major issues, or do we just need to galvanize in a different way?
I think what the biggest difference is, Cuddy, we don't have people who are charismatic anymore. That's the problem. What happened to, you know, a lot of our leaders who were, you know, charismatic? You know, I look at sort of like Vashti McKenzie, a bishop of the AME Church, somebody like Freddie Haynes, and I think our generation doesn't have that anymore, you know, because I think there is, Cuddy, and when you look at the civil rights piece, you had some people who were mobilizers and some people were organizers, okay? Fannie Lou Hamer, and I think she represents the best of Black America, right? They said it was like Mississippi was in her bones. She had charisma. This sister worked on a plantation till she was like 50, but she could take these complex political issues, bring them back to the plantation, and you got Black folk going to vote in Ruleville, Mississippi, 1960, 1961, largely because of her, all right? So we got to get some charisma, and I don't know what has happened to it. I'm still transfixed when I watch Malcolm speak, sort of an H. Rap Brown speak, and a Afeni Shakur. There's a certain magnetism you get from watching them speak, right? And I don't know what has happened to that. It seemed like in many ways we have lost all our soul. We've lost our soul when it comes to being able to move the crowd.
Not only that part, that's a really good point, but I also think the translation between middle class and lower class and middle class and higher class is kind of lost in some sense too. Even though we have more social media than ever, right, there's still things that get lost in translation between higher education and low-key community.
Right. I mean, we haven't done a good job. I remember when I was at Jackson State, Cuddy, I was taking an economics class, and we were dealing with all these complex theories, right? And I remember my boy looked outside. He looked outside the classroom. It was on the edge of campus, and he said, you know, Dr. Jeffries, can you teach us some economics that will help us rebuild the community that we live in? And I remember the whole class just got silent, because here we weren't learning abstract theories, right? And now you let other folk come in our community and build thriving businesses, okay? And so that stuff is profound. We have got, I think the gap between the campus and the community has gotten so large that we got to sort of bring it back to what it was. And I'm gonna indict Black studies. I'm gonna indict Latino studies. All these ethnic studies programs, I would argue over the last 15, 20 years have become very boutique-ish. When you think about their founding, San Francisco State, places like that, it was very much rooted in how can we use the resources at the university to solve problems in the community. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Appreciate you coming through and joining us. Don't want to keep you much longer from your son's football game. So just appreciate you coming to bless us with your knowledge.
Thank y'all. I'm out here. I'm out here in Waco, Texas. So if y'all get a chance, Google Sam Holes right quick. And that's why I'm about to get on this highway real quick. The lynching of Sam Holes. It was in, was it Sam Holes? That was Jesse Washington. Jesse Washington, Waco, Texas. It'll blow you away if you Google that. And that is where I am at Midway High School. But Dr. Clark, thank you and the crew for having me this evening.
Yeah.
All right. And appreciate what y'all doing. All right. Peace.
Now, for the crowd, before y'all go, give me like 5 minutes to kind of talk about next month's book and the discussion. So we're going to have Dr. Eddie R. Cole, who wrote The Campus Color Line, College Presidents in the Struggle for Black Freedom, talking with us. And he's going to be in conversation with Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett, who is the president of Houston-Tillotson University. And so this book gives us a lot of insights into the history of not only Black college presidents' role in the Black freedom struggle, but the presidents of predominantly white institutions as well. And I think it'd be good to hear Dr. Pierce Burnett's voice in that as a Black woman who was the president of a historically Black college, because back in them days, it wasn't too many of them. So thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you all here. Langston, you got some things you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask you a couple questions before you close out. Between now and next month's book club, how can they stay in contact with everything that you have going on? What's the best way to stay in contact with your book club? They want to read the book with you. What does that look like for them? So
on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Langston D. Clark. I also have at Entrepreneurial_Appetite on Instagram. I make posts and whatnot about what it is that we're reading. I have clips and things like that I post about that are relevant to the month's reading and whatnot. And it is always good for you to read the book, but it's not required for class. But if you don't read it, you're missing out on some good knowledge and some good information. I encourage you all to do these things with your families, doing with your churches, whatever organizations that you're involved with. And I think it's a great opportunity for the audience to be able to actually speak with the authors. And so that's one of the things that I try to do as far as building community. If you want to be a part of this, you want to host a book club, you have a book in mind and you want to try to connect with the author. In the past, I've had people who have been attendees be the ones to facilitate the conversation with their favorite authors or the author of their favorite book. So you can also hit me up about that. My email address is langston.clark@utsa.edu, and we can talk about making that happen as well. So, or if you've written a book, we'd love to have you on sometime as well.
And if they have friends that were not able to join us tonight, where can they find a copy of this video?
So I'm going to be posting a video on YouTube. I think if you type in a bar Entrepreneurial Appetite, I have a page. Also, I'll be launching a podcast on Friday. It'll be on iTunes and Spotify and all of that as well. And it's Entrepreneurial Appetite's Black Book Discussions.
Awesome. Thank you, Langston, for everything you do with your program. Thank you, everybody, who joined us tonight. We really appreciate Dr. Sutton, Jason Molan, Dr. Leonard Moore for joining us and having a great discussion. Thank y'all so much for attending. We look forward to seeing y'all next month.
Thank you.